when you travel, can you only pray half the ritual prayer expected of you? Was Nabi Muhammad leading half of his army in a ritual prayer as battle raged on? What does Kitaban Maqutan mean? These three terms are what we're going to talk about in this video. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Moses, and this, as I said, is the 8th video of the Salat in the Quran series. They say that the Quran allows you to shorten your prayer, your ritual prayer, when you are traveling, even if that was through an airplane and you were going from, say, New York to Chicago, or from Hyderabad to Karachi, or from Sahiwal to Mianwali. That Prophet Muhammad, whilst he would be leading his army for a battle, half of his army he would lead in a ritual prayer, a literal ritual prayer, whilst the other half continued to fight. And then they also argue that Kitaban Maqutan actually implies, supports, is the evidence for ritual prayers to be read out 5 times a day. Before we continue on and explore these premises and explore these claims, a quick reminder, this is the 8th video of the series called Salat in the Quran. Now, if you don't know where to find the other videos of this series, all you have to do is to go to the channel, go to the playlist icon, and in there you will find a playlist labeled Salat in the Quran in English. This video you will find in there, and also the other 7 videos of the series that have come before. Now, if you are wondering, or if you will wonder, what do terms like Salat and Wudu and Sajda and Ruku' and Masjid, etc. mean, then you really should go and watch those previous videos. If you were to ask any questions about those terms in the comments on this video, I will only reiterate what I'm going to say now, which is please go back and watch this series from the beginning. As part of an examination of these claims that are made, I would very much like us to look at the context in which these 3 ayat appear, to see whether what is said can be supported by the ayat that come before and after these 3 ayat in question. I have picked 10 ayat, so we can clearly see the context. On the right hand side are all of those ayat starting from 95, going all the way through to 105. What I've also done is I've given a very short blurb, a very short summary of what the takeaway message from each of these ayat is, so we can contrast whether the meaning that's imposed on those 3 ayat in question holds or not. 495, which is the one over here on the right hand side, it's a reminder for the mu'mineen who stay behind and those mujahidun who actively strive. It's a reminder that the two are not the same. 96 says that there are levels of acceptance with and from Allah. 97 says that there are excuses made by the zalimeen that are not accepted. 498, there's an exception clause to the above ayah over here. 499 is a reminder of Allah being Ghafoor for those who do have genuine exceptions. 4100 is to encourage migration, whether it's physical or mental, in the path of Allah. Now comes 4101, and somehow suddenly the tone changes if you were to read the traditional understandings and translations in tafsir, where now we are deriving a fiqhi order to halve the number of the rakat that are to be prayed in a ritual prayer as you are traveling or during war. 4102, which is this long ayah, suddenly the context has changed once more, and there's a battle going on here. There's an army, there's a battle, and half of the army, led by the Prophet, is now praying in front of the Prophet. I repeat, in front, not behind, in front of the Prophet. And once that half has done the ritual prayer, then the other half comes. We're going to talk more about that and how strange that actually appears if you were to go by the normal translations. Then 4103 is equally puzzling for those who want to ponder on the Quran. Suddenly, we're now being told that after you have done the ritual prayer, you are to do zikr on your sides when you're on your beds, and then after that you are to do the ritual prayer again. So you are doing the salat here, which you perform to do zikr of Allah, but you have done the salah, then you're doing the zikr of Allah, and then you're doing the salah again. And somehow from this the ruling is drawn that this term here, Kitaban Maqutan, actually means 5 times a day the ritual prayer that you have to establish, you have to pray. Let's continue on with 2 more ayat. 4104, there's a reminder to remain steadfast in your mission. 4105 is a reminder that Allah sent down the Al-Kitab to be used for judgment by the judge. I ask you, if you're an honest student of the Quran, if you really want to ponder on what the ayat of the Quran say, these 3 ayat that I have highlighted, from which these orders have been derived by the traditional mufassirin, muhaddithin, and ulama, rijal al-din, do they actually fit in the context? In these ayats that have just set the scene, how did we come to an order where you can suddenly do half of your prayers when there's a war, when you're traveling? And then how did that army come to be in a battlefield with the Prophet leading half of the army in front of him whilst the other half waits? And then why are you doing zikr after salah when you should have done zikr as part of the salah? And then whilst you've done that zikr on your sides, why are you doing it again? And that too 5 times a day, which this term does not mean. And then suddenly, why does the context change once more in the last 2 ayat that I've picked in this sequence of ayat on the right hand side? As we have been doing in this series so far, I will offer propositions, as I will have 3 propositions for each of these 3 ayat to see how we should understand these ayat of the Quran per the context and per the terminology, per the terms that the Quran uses for itself. But first, I will really like us to have a detailed, close look at each of these 3 ayat, so we can see the strangeness that we are left with by the traditional scholar that does not seem to make sense. By the way, if you were to stick around until the end, and that is the end of this video, I would also like to talk about the last video I did, which was the difference of spellings between the 2 forms that the word salah comes in. Salah comes in 2 different forms in the Quran. I talked about this last week, and since then I would like to offer another note on what I had presented. So if you stick until the end, you will also hear about that particular video. For now, let's pick the first ayah, which is this one, 4:101, which is taken to give you the injunction that you can shorten your prayer. You can have the number of rak'ah that you have to pray for a ritual prayer. The ayah goes something like this: وَإِذَا ضَرَبْتُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ فَلَيْسَ عَلَيْكُمْ جُنَاحٌ أَن تَقْصُرُوا مِنْ الصَّلَاةِ إِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَن يَفْتِنَكُمُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا إِنَّ الْكَافِرِينَ كَانُوا لَكُمْ عَدُوًّا مُبِينًا. When you Muslims travel in the land, there is no sin on you if you shorten your salah prayer, if you fear that the disbelievers may attack you. Verily the disbelievers are ever unto you open enemies. Translation here is done by Hilali and Khan. Let's just pick a few terms, apart from the overall gist of what we're going to talk about. The ayah does not say Muslims. وَإِذَا ضَرَبْتُمْ. Who is the tum? It does not follow necessarily that the tum, the damir tum here, refers to those who follow a particular organized religion called Islam. This is not what the ayah is saying. There is no sin. Junah is not sin. This is not sin. This is something even the traditional circles would allow for, but they have specifically used a religiously charged term here. Shorten your salah prayer. We know from the previous videos of this series that the salah does not mean a ritual prayer. So if the faulty assumption by the traditional is to be discarded, then taqsuru min as-salah cannot be understood as doing half or shortening your ritual prayer. Disbelievers traditionally is understood to be those who do not do the shahadatain, that is, those people who for whatever reason do not want to say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, that I believe that there is one Allah, that He is the Lord of it all, and that I proclaim, that I give witness that Muhammad is a messenger of Allah. Those are considered to be the disbelievers in the traditional circle. Again, I've talked about this quite a number of times in my Urdu videos. Kuffar in Quran are not those people who do not follow a religion called Islam. That, frankly, the Quran has got nothing to do with. Let's go on to the second ayah. 4:102. It is argued, and it is suggested by the traditional understanding, that there is praying, ritual worship happening during a battle, and those people who are praying or doing sajda in front of the Imam, and that obviously there's a war happening in there. And this is quite a long ayah, so I will let you read it because I will cover this going forwards as well. Let me just read the translation for now. When you, O Messenger Muhammad, are among them and lead them in as-salah, the prayer, let one party of them stand up in salat prayer, with you taking their arms with them. When they finish their prostrations, let them take their position in the rear, and let the other party come up which has not yet prayed, and let them pray with you taking all the precautions and bearing arms. those who disbelieve wish, if you were negligent of your arms and your baggage, to attack you in a single rush. But there's no sin on you if you put away your arms because of the inconvenience of rain or because you're ill. But take every precaution for yourselves. Verily, Allah has prepared a humiliating torment for the disbelievers. Again, translation by Hilali and Khan. I'll pick up on a few terms because I'll talk about this ayah in detail going forwards. When you is not referring necessarily to Messenger Muhammad. There's no name written out there. So I don't deny that this could not have applied to the first recipient of the Quran, but it does not say وَإِذَا كُنْتَ يَا مُحَمَّدْ فِيهِمْ. It does not say when you, Muhammad, were with them. So we can't necessarily presume that this is talking only to one person for one particular contextual event that ever happened once. Now, this is where the real problem happens. When you are among them. Now, this them is pointing to this here. لَهُمْ فَأَقَمْتَ لَهُمْ. Lahum has been translated, understood throughout this ayah as the people who consider themselves to be Muslims and would do a ritual prayer. As I will talk about this, this is a very key term, but I'm just pointing it out right now, that the assumption here is that these people here, pointed by whom, are the Muslims. Then again, as-salah, the prayer, is not a ritual worship, a set of coordinated bodily movements. It's just not that. Let's continue. When they finish their prostrations, فَإِذَا سَجَدُوا فَإِذَا سَجَدُوا. It does not say فَإِذَا سَجَدْتُمْ. So if we take the traditional understanding where the Imam, the Nabi Muhammad in this case, he's the one leading the prayer. Normally how we pray, the Imam stands in front and the people praying stand behind him. And all of them do the sajda together. فَإِذَا سَجَدُوا. When they have done the sajda. It does not say فَإِذَا سَجَدْتُمْ, when all of you have done sajda. So what is happening here is the Imam who's leading the prayer, as in here, when you lead the prayer, is the Imam not doing the sajda? Is it only the one party who is doing the sajda and not the Imam? What kind of a prayer is that? Frankly, I've never seen that prayer. I've never seen that prayer ever in my life. Then the second problem happens. Let them take their position in the rear. فَلْيَكُونُوا مِنْ وَرَائِكُمْ. Then, if once they have done the sajda, let them be behind you. Again, if the prayer was being done behind the Imam, if you're already behind the Imam, how do you go behind him again? So there are two takeaways from here, which are very interesting to ponder. Why is that group of people doing sajda without the Imam? And why are they going behind when they already should have been behind? Junah again has been translated as sin, which is incorrect, which is inaccurate. Matar, rain, is a very interesting term. I won't talk in great detail about it, but let me just say, matar in the Quran is not necessarily a good thing, nor is it just a level 1 understanding of water falling from the clouds. This is not what the Quran talks about, but obviously they have just taken this to be a specific rain. Well, that leads me to a question. If we are going to make it exclusively specific down to rain, so as in when you have been inconvenienced by rain, well, what about other disasters like an earthquake? Is this command only to apply if there is to be rain? What about other forms of disaster that might strike you? What if you weren't in the 7th century Arabia, but you were in a region where you had constant other sorts of problems, where you had volcanoes erupting, for example? As I said, you had earthquakes that happened recently. What would you do then? Does this command not apply to you anymore? And yet again, disbelievers, kafirin, disbelievers, is assumed without an argument are those people who do not say the shahadatain, who do not do the prayers as the religious scholars perform. And there's another big question that I would like to pose. In all of this ayah, throughout this ayah, where is the war? Where is this battle that we have been told, that we assume is the background, the backdrop of this particular scene? Where is the battle? Just because we see the word asliha, does that necessarily lead us towards a scene punctuated with all forms and depictions of warfare and things that come along with that? Where, I ask again, is the war in this particular ayah, or in the context that we just read? Where is the battle? Let's look at the traditional translation of the third ayah, and then we'll continue on to the next part of this video. فَإِذَا قَضَيْتُمُ الصَّلَاةِ. translated as, when you have finished the as-salah, as in the congregational prayer, فَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا وَعَلَى جُنُوبِكُمْ. Remember Allah standing, sitting down, and lying down on your sides. فَإِذَا أَطْمَأْنَنْتُمْ فَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ. But when you are free from danger, perform as-salah, إقامة الصلاة. إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ كَانَتْ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ كِتَابًا مَوْقُوتًا. Verily the prayer is enjoined on the believers at fixed hours. Questions raised by an honest student of the Quran. Remembering Allah, wasn't the ritual prayer here, فَإِذَا قَضَيْتُمُ الصَّلَاةَ, wasn't the purpose of the salah to remember God? If you have done the zikr in the as-salah, why are you doing the zikr of Allah again? فَإِذَا قَضَيْتُمُ الصَّلَاةَ then after this event, then do zikrullah. Does the salah, the ritual prayer, not contain the zikr of Allah to begin with? What does this mean? وَعَلَى جُنُوبِكُمْ, and lying down on your sides. Who does the zikr of Allah, whether it's in salah or in some other way, whilst they're lying down on their sides? I don't know who does that. Do you? Perform as-salah. فَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ. So you've done qada as-salah, you've done the salah, then you do the dhikr of Allah as if the salah did not contain the dhikr to begin with, and then you're doing the salah again. What is happening here? What is happening here? Kitaban Maqutan has been translated as fixed hours. What are those hours? Do I need ask the question that I asked in the very first video of the series? Did Allah forget to give us times of the day in which we are to do these ritual prayers, whilst forgetting entirely about Scandinavia, where we've got no sunlight for 6 months and sun for the other 6? What about if you were in space? What happens then? Is this Kitaban Maqutan equals 5 times a day prayer, ritual prayer, that only applies to a section of the globe and not the whole earth, not even the whole earth? So to summarize some of the problems with the traditional narrative on these 3 ayat, no, there's no way to derive from the ayat that we read any exemption on halving the number of rak'at that you have to pray whilst you are traveling or in war. There's no concept of rak'ah as in units of prayer in the Quran anywhere whatsoever. Why are soldiers praying in front of the Prophet? In front. This is not an idle question. It's a question I'd like to get a proper answer to, even from the traditional circle. I haven't yet gotten it. Why does that ayah have no battle at all? We assume so. The ayah doesn't say that. When there is sajda, why are only the soldiers doing the sajda at the ritual prayer and not the Imam, the Prophet, leading them? And as I said before, did Allah forget to give us times of those ritual prayers? In the last ayah, as I said, why are people doing the ritual prayer for dhikr of Allah, then doing zikr when they're lying on their sides, and then they do the ritual prayer for dhikr all over again? And most importantly, why does the traditional understanding of these 3 ayat not fit the context of the ayat before and after? It does not. That is my contention. If you agree with that, a fair question to pose to the traditional circle is, why does this not fit? Now I'd like to offer propositions, and as I had said before, we will capture all of these propositions at the end of the series and we'll put them together to look at the concept of salah and all things that come along with it in one go. So proposition number 1 for today is this. Qasr of the salah means to temporarily limit, modify one's duty of forming, strengthening two-way connections. Let's keep this in mind and look at the first ayah. وَإِذَا ضَرَبْتُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. And if you strike out, try to make a change in the land, ard, land, contextual based on what one faces in their struggles, فَلَيْسَ عَلَيْكُمْ جُنَاحٌ أَن تَقْصُرُوا مِنَ الصَّلَاةِ. Then no issue if you were to modify, limit the two-way connections, if خِفْتُمْ أَن يَفْتِنَكُمُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا. If you feared the rejectors bent on not doing good will cause fitna, trials, difficulty for you. إِنَّ الْكَافِرِينَ كَانُوا لَكُمْ عَدُوًّا مُبِينًا. Surely the willful rejectors have been an open, manifest enemy for you all. There's no ritual prayer that you're doing halving of the number of rak'ah whilst you are traveling or facing an enemy. That is not what the ayah is saying. Proposition number 2. The Quran does not talk about ritualistic prayers during battles. Before I start talking about this ayah, I will grant you upfront that what I am saying, based upon the context, will not make a lot of people happy. But this is my fahm of the Quran as of this point, looking specifically at how the Quran talks about this event within the context of the ayats before and after. وَإِذَا كُنْتَ فِيهِمْ, and if you were with them, the kuffar, not the Muslimin, not the good people, not the religious people, not the mu'mineen, the peacekeepers. وَإِذَا كُنْتَ فِيهِمْ, and if you were with them, the kuffar. Why do you say the kuffar? Because in the context, the hum are those people who you fear, those people who are the kuffar. And I will take this understanding and apply this on the context of the other ayat in the end, so we can see if this holds or not. Let's continue. وَإِذَا كُنْتَ فِيهِمْ, and if you were with them, the kuffar, فَأَقَمْتَ لَهُمْ الصَّلَاةِ, and straightened, reforged, fixed for them, the kuffar, the positive two-way connections, فَلْتَقُمْ طَائِفَةٌ مِّنْهُمْ مَعَكَ وَلْيَأْخُذُوا أَسْلِحَتَهُمْ, then let remain a party from them, the kuffar, with you, and let them take up their instruments, tools, devices, as part of them learning the salah, the form of it, which will be contextually different. Asliha does not necessarily mean only weapons of mass destruction, or bow and arrow, or swords, or anything of that sort. Even in English, when I say weapons, I have my intellectual weapons. I bring with me my devices to destroy my enemy. I don't necessarily always mean that there is a bloodbath, a literal bloodbath that I'm going to engage in on a literal battlefield. The context does not allow us to suddenly transport ourselves into a mythical battlefield. And that is why I don't understand here this term to be taking us towards anything like that. And as I continue on, I hope you can see where I'm coming from. فَإِذَا سَجَدُوا, then when they, the kuffar, follow the commands of Allah, فَإِذَا سَجَدُوا, and that's why it's not sajadtum. It's not when you all do sajada, because the Imam and those with him, they have already done the sajda, as in they have already started following the orders of Allah and His system. So it's not فَإِذَا سَجَدْتُمْ, but فَإِذَا سَجَدُوا, then when they, the kuffar, follow the commands of Allah, فَلْيَكُونُوا مِنْ وَرَائِكُمْ, then they are to be behind you all, as in part of the peace spreaders now, peacekeepers now. They are behind you, they are part of you. They have become your group. وَلْتَأْتِي طَائِفَةٌ أُخْرَى لَمْ يُصَلُّوا, then let come another party who hasn't yet formed these two-way positive connections. فَلْيُصَلُّوا مَعَكَ وَلْيَأْخُذُوا حِذْرَهُمْ وَأَسْلِحَتَهُمْ, and they are to form these connections with you and take up precautions and their instruments, tools, devices. وَدَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لَوْ تَغْفُلُونَ عَنْ أَسْلِحَتِكُمْ وَأَمْتِعَتِكُمْ فَيَمِيلُونَ عَلَيْكُمْ مَيْلَةً وَاحِدَةً, these who knowingly reject would love for you to ignore your instruments, tools, devices and resources so that they can target you with one concerted effort. وَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْكُمْ إِنْ كَانَ بِكُمْ أَذًى مِّن مَطَرٍ أَوْ كُنْتُمْ مَرْضَى أَن تَدَعُوا أَسْلِحَتَكُمْ وَخُذُوا حِذْرَكُمْ, and there is no issue if with you was a discomfort from matar, difficulty, not rain, difficulty, or you were sick, temporarily disabled, that you lay down your instruments, tools, devices, and while taking your precautions. إِنَّ اللَّهَ أَعَدَّ لِلْكَافِرِينَ عَذَابًا مُهِينًا, surely Allah has prepared a shameful azab, separation, for the willful rejectors. Let's continue with the third ayah and the third proposition. Proposition number 3. Kitaban Maqutan refers to the situational, circumstance-based duty of as-salah for the peacemakers. فَإِذَا قَضَيْتُمُ الصَّلَاةِ, then when you have delivered the understanding of as-salah to the kuffar as a result of the deliberations in the previous ayah, وَفَإِذَا قَضَيْتُمُ الصَّلَاةِ, when you have delivered the understanding of as-salah, فَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ قِيَامًا وَقُعُودًا وَعَلَى جُنُوبِكُمْ, then make prominent, discuss, debate the system of Allah in all situations, whether you be a leader, a passive participant, or on the sidelines. فَإِذَا أَتْمَأْنَنْتُمْ, and then when you are satisfied with the result of your salah with the kuffar, your precautions, your asliha, فَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ, then establish, strengthen, reforge these two-way connections. إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ كَانَتْ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ كِتَابًا مَوْقُوتًا, surely the process of forming positive two-way connections has been an ongoing duty, shaped, driven, punctuated by time, circumstances for the mu'mineen, the peace spreaders. With those three propositions in mind, I would like us to go back to those ayat that we started with, and let's see if we understand the context better. 495. Reminder for the mu'mineen who stay behind and mujahideen who actively strive, that there are differences between them. 96 says that. 97. Excuses for those of zalimeen who don't find the excuses being answered. 498. There's an exception. 499. Reminder that Allah is Ghufur for those who do have genuine exceptions or reasons. 4100. That migration in Allah's path, physical or mental, is a good thing, is encouraged. 4101. That the form of the as-salah can change if there is fear from the kuffar. 4102. Given the opportunity, the salah can be set up with the kuffar, where they are to be given tools of understanding whilst taking precautions. 4103. Once the understanding of the as-salah has been delivered, follow it up with discussions, deliberations, and then work to set it up. That time-based, constant activity, punctuated by intervals, is a duty for the mu'mineen. 4104. Reminder to remain steadfast in your mission. 4105. Reminder that Allah sent down the ا-ΑЛص to be used for judgment by the judge. There was quite a bit that we covered. So I'd like to offer a quick summary of what we've talked about so far. Proposition number 1 was that the qasr of the as-salah means to temporarily limit, modify one's duty of forming, strengthening two-way connections. Proposition number 2, the Quran does not talk about ritualistic prayers during battles. Proposition number 3, Kitaban Maqutan refers to the situational, circumstance-based duty of as-salah for the peacemakers. The Quran doesn't mention any ritualistic worship involving coordinated, orchestrated physical movements. This is a reminder from the very first video of the series. There are no number of rak'at of ritual prayer that can be shortened during war or travel. The Prophet did not lead half his men in ritual worship in front of him while battle raged. And again, Allah, let's not blame him. He did not forget to give us times of these 5 times per day ritual prayers. He didn't, because they're not part of his deen. It's just as simple as that. Let's not make it overly complicated and blame Allah whilst we're at it. Before I finish up and before I talk about the note about the last video, I'd like to cover something that has been coming up for some time. This is a reply from me to those who criticize my fahm of the Quran, despite the fact that I present myself and believe myself only to be a student of the Quran. Somebody in particular who I really admire and trust and consider as one of my inspirations criticized me recently for talking about terms of the Quran that I understand without understanding the whole Mus'haf as it is. I'd like to quickly talk about this and then I'll move on to the next point of this video. This channel exists for 2 reasons, 2 primary reasons, and I talk about the Quran for 2 main reasons. I present my fahm, this is a reminder again, I present my fahm of the Mus'haf at this time to, number 1, force myself to dig deep and learn. When I talk about topics that interest me, I am forced, as part of my own study style, to dig deep, to investigate, to look at how the Quran uses its own terms, to go and do a deep dive in the Quranic method, in the Quranic language, in the Quranic lisan. And that is, for me, the best way to learn. But I also do it, B, to attract those people who know better than me, who understand better than me. Those are, for me, like-minded azwaj, not wives, as some people argue. Those people, I want to attract them and their attention and their focus for further growth of myself, for myself and for those who might also learn through this process of discussions and dialectics. Will I ever be able to say that I know all the Quran? I don't think so. And I don't think I know anybody who could say that they understand all the Quran or a certain percentage of the Quran. But I believe that with effort, as I continue to grow my fahm, so can you. And as time goes on, you will be able to see the growth in my fahm of the Quran, and hopefully along with me, you will be growing as well. I genuinely believe that we all complete each other. There are parts of the Quran, part of the fahm, that I've got maybe blinders on, that I haven't considered them to be a certain way. I haven't done deep dive yet, but this is where you could help me, and vice versa. Where I lack, you correct me. Where I'm deficient, you can improve. And to cap all of what I've said, I will like to repeat this once more. I am no authority. No authority. I do not give hidayah. I only offer my fahm. The Quran is from Allah. This is my genuine belief based after a lot of study that I've done to satisfy myself. The Quran is divine. I offer my limited understanding, my perspective of the path that I understand. I don't ask for followers, nor do I say what I have, what I offer is the only possible interpretation that can ever be for these ayat. Challenge me, question me, debate with me, but ask Allah for hidayah, because hidayah, guidance, comes from Him to those who seek it, those who are muhtadun, not those who sit back and say, I have got hidayah, there's nothing more for me to do. And once you find myself to be behind you in fahm, guide me, help me. But I really hope that you go beyond my fahm. My children, my 2 kids, my daughter and my son, there would be nothing that would please me more than to find them gain a better understanding of the Quran than what I inherited from my parents. On that very note, I'll now like to quickly talk about the last video I did. In the last video, which talked about the difference of spellings between Salah and Salah when it's written out with this form and that form, it has been pointed to me that there's another way to understand the difference as well. Alif Khinjariya in the Quran, example, when we see az-zakah written up with Alif Khinjariya on waw, al-riba, al-kufar, or al-kafirin, it has been said, and I'm aware of this, that Alif Khinjariya denotes endurance and consistency over time. Thus, Salah, as-Salah, with this particular tashkil, is something that is done consistently and dutifully, versus Salah in this form, which changes based on context, may not be da'im, may not be consistent. This is a concept that I'm yet to explore further, and this is an honest admission from me as a student of the Quran. And I do intend to personally look into this more as time goes on, because all of these other terms that have been pointed out, and there are others, the Quran does use them separately. The Quran does make a distinction between the way different words are written out. And we find a number of these nouns, number of these words, where we find different tashkil that does end up giving a slightly different understanding of the overall concept. If you've got more to talk about this, hey, I would like to hear from you. What I found interesting though, that despite that observation, I found that still meshing with what I had presented based on my fahm of the Quran by looking at all of those ayat and how they occur. One form of the spelling, regardless of which understanding we take, does still denote the principle, which for me is this one, whilst the other one, its form, which is this one. So whether we take this Alif Khinjariya to be denoting consistency, something done over time, dutifully, always the same way, the proper way, or as overall guiding principle for all of us to follow, it's the same thing we're talking about, but from different angles. And whether we take this, as I had said, to be a particular form, interpretation, translation, isomorphism of the overall concept, or something that changes based upon people, as is argued by the by the theory that I just talked about, to me it appears we're still talking about the same thing. And that is very interesting, that we can come towards the same understanding through different pathways. And as I said, I think this is quite beautiful. We should learn from each other, but also remain ready to accept evidence whenever it's offered by whoever. Instead of tearing each other down, instead of criticizing others, I think it's much better that we point flaws where we see them, complete the work of others where we find deficiencies, and continue to evolve our understanding of the Mus'haf, which is for all times, for all people, for all circumstances. The last ayah for today, and then we'll finish up. هذا بلاغ للناس ولينذروا به وليعلموا أنما هو إله واحد وليذكر أولو الألباب. This, the Quran, is a proclamation for humanity, that they may be warned thereby, and know that He is one God, and that people of understanding make Him, His system, prominent. Until the next time, Assalamu alaikum.